And welcome to another episode of the Unleashed Performance Therapy Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Jamie, and we have another special guest, a real good friend of mine, Miss Allora Bellanger, DPT. How's it going, Allora?
Going well. This has been a wonderful, lazy Sunday that I have not had in a really long time. So this is the highlight of my day.
Those are the best.
Well, I hope we're not interrupting, encroaching on
Oh
your
God,
lovely
no,
Sunday.
I got my nap in, got my food cooked. I'm ready to go.
Oh, there you go. Well, Laura, fun fact, Laura is an alumni of the school that me and Jamie are currently in. She knows a handful of our instructors, professors, and faculty around there. So she's giving us the dirt on all them and
Oh,
whatnot.
she gives
Yeah.
what to look out
Nah.
for.
Joking.
Oh God, I hope no one from that school listens.
Nah, joking.
Girl.
Yeah. But to start off, how did you get into PT, Alora?
Yeah, so I think my route's a little different than most. A lot of people I talk to had an injury of some sort, or, they had an athletic trainer that inspired them to do something other than, be an athlete because they knew they wanted something bigger. But for me, I was kind of at this crossroad when I got out of undergrad in 2011. I knew I wanted to be in medicine. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. I just didn't want to be in school that long. So it was really between being a PA, being a PT. And so I like the idea of one, having a doctor degree being called doctor, because that's kind of cool. But two, I really liked how long the kind of time that you get to spend with your patients was really important to me. And I just felt like as a physician, it'd be very quick, in and out, 5 minutes, not really getting a chance to get to know my patients well. Versus as a PT, depending on where you work, you can get up to an hour and a half with your patient, depending on the setting you're in. And I loved that. For me, that was really important.
Absolutely. I think that's a big reason that a lot of us get into PT is because we want that one-on-one interaction. And I think that's what means the most to us. So we don't have to just have somebody come in and then kick them out five seconds later and charge them $300.
Because a lot of times these patients too are just looking for someone to listen and hear what they're saying to help them, and give them a solution versus like, okay, I kind of hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to really address that right now. This is what you're here for. Follow up in 3 months. And it's like, okay, but you want to treat the person holistically, right? You can't just focus on what's in front. So I've definitely had experiences where probably should have ended the session 30 minutes prior to when I did end it. But hey, the patient felt happy. They felt at ease when I left, and it was worth it for me.
Were you in the Flex program as well? The Flex
No,
DPT?
I was not. I did
So you did residential.
I did the full-blown residential. I moved out. I was living in Beaumont, Texas at the time, where my dad's family from. Moved out to Austin. Luckily, I had a friend from elementary school, actually, elementary, middle, and high school, who was already living out there. And her and another girl were looking for a place to live. I was like, well, I'm moving. Why don't we all live together? So it worked out really well that I didn't have to look for roommates because I already knew the people I was going to room up. So that was a big stress relief off of me because I'm an only child, or at least I was raised as an only child. Let me put it that way. I do have older brother and sisters, so I like my space. But I also knew Austin was expensive, and I'm like, I gotta have roommates while I'm in school.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So definitely, we're co-workers. So I'm a tech there at Tier. Laura's a therapist there. So that neuro route, of course, that's what you're on now. Was that always the route that you wanted to go coming out of school?
When I came out of school, I didn't know. So the ortho I really liked the ortho in the aspect of, like most therapists, I want to work with sports. I want to work with athletes. I want to work with active individuals. But there was something about the neurological population, at least for me, that really excited me was, there's really no cookie cutter template protocol, return to sport kind of thing, which RJ and I have talked about actually, that you get with the neuro. And so it's really your creative mind, like what can you do to help these people get moving better? And I like that. I like not being kind of pigeonholed into like, here's the protocol that you have to follow. When in reality, it's like, this is like best case scenario protocol of someone who comes in with absolutely no other issues other than what's in front of you. Versus neurological population, it's like, there's a lot of things we got to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
I have people coming in who are on dialysis regularly, or someone who comes in and they might have had a stroke, but then previously they might have had a total knee replacement that didn't heal all the way because their stroke got involved. So there's a lot of factors that you have to consider with the neurological population, and I think for me that's what keeps it interesting.
And I think that with the ortho stuff, the protocols sometimes really piss me off. Because
Yeah.
some doctors have some really strict protocols, and it seems like they don't make sense. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if but and then the other doctors have a really broad protocol, so
Yep.
they trust the therapist, and they give you a lot of freedom to treat the patient in the way that you want to. But the ones that are really strict really kind of, man, they get under my skin.
And I've been on both sides. I've been on sides where it's like, nope, doctor does not want me to go off this protocol, like I have to stick to it. But then there have been others where it's like, I'll call the office. I'm like, hey, this patient is actually progressing a lot better than anticipated. Doesn't make any sense for me to keep them on week 4 of protocol when really I could probably get them to about week 7 or 8. And they're like, as long as they're safe, they feel good, do what you got to do. I'm like, great. And of course, you're talking to the patient about this as well. Like, look, here's the protocol. Here's where we're at. You're coming back to me each session feeling pretty good, not overly sore, not overly in pain. It doesn't make sense for me to keep you here when we could probably move you along a little bit more. So there are doctors out there that are like, they trust us, which I think is great because that
For sure.
frustrating.
And I think that really sets apart a really good physical therapist from one that's not so great, someone who can really assess the patient response, and
Right.
they know they're at a point in their protocol, but they could definitely be progressed much quicker than anticipated. So being able to see that and assess the patient response correctly really sets some therapists apart.
Definitely, I absolutely agree with that.
So staying along the lines of the health and fitness, but outside your profession, I know when I started working with you, I believe you were going through a competition for
Yeah.
bodybuilding. So you
I
are
was
a bodybuilder.
I was
So
prepping for a show, yes.
okay. So now I have some friends that they do like the physique, the bodybuilding stuff like that. Of course, in my head it all runs together. What is it that you compete in?
So I started in bikini. This past year is when I actually got interested in wellness. And so wellness is basically a step up from bikini. Bikini is where most women gravitate to. It's really, do you look good in a bikini? Do you have the S silhouette, they call it, when you're in your kind of front / side pose, I'll call it, because some people that's their front, some people that's their side pose. Versus wellness. Wellness is really looking at, what do the lower legs look like? And I'm a naturally bigger person. So for me to succeed in bikini, I would really have to drop some muscle mass in addition to weight. And that was just not the route I wanted to go. So I did do bikini. Reason why I did bikini is because I'd already done it before in 2019. So I just wanted to compare myself from where I was in 2019 to 2023. And even though I did not place in 2023, I was 10 times better, if not 100 times better than where I was in 2019. Like they call it the package. So my package that I brought, looking at photos, and I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely did it right this time.
All right. So before 2019, what made you decide to get into that? To go
Yeah, how long have
Um,
you were doing it
that
for?
route?
So this was only my second and third show, respectively, 2023. I only did one show in 2019. The way I got into it is, I don't know if other women can relate, but I just had a crappy relationship issue kind of thing that did not go well. I was bored at the gym. I needed something to take my mind off of it. And a friend recommended, like, oh, why don't you try bodybuilding? I'm like, okay, cool. Thinking that this would solve all of my
Yeah,
emotional
sure.
problems. It really didn't. But it definitely, I mean, I got bit by the bug. I loved the schedule. I love having something in front of me that I could follow and like know that as long as I stuck to this, I would start to see results. Um, and so that's kind of how I got into it. I really had no idea what I was getting into.
Isn't it crazy how you can you can have that you go to exercise for some kind of release, or you had a bad breakup, or you're just really sad, and you go to exercise and you kind of just throw yourself into it, and you become enveloped in it,
Oh,
and it takes over, and it's you, like you said, you got bit by that bug. And
did.
I've had that before, and it was like I was in the gym 6 7 days a week all
Yep.
day. There was a point where I would even call into work in order for me to work out, because I had to make sure that I had enough time. I got out of class, then I was supposed to go to
And
work, but I
that
called in
sounds
so
like
I could
me.
go work out instead.
I never called into work, but I was one of those people where I'm like, got to get a workout in before I go to work. Like
Hmm.
I'm a morning person. I got to get up and go. And then there were plenty of times where I slept through my alarm, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to go off to work. Okay, how am I gonna do this? Because I get off at this time, but then I got to be home for this. So like, I mean, I was scheduling like, how am I gonna get myself into the gym? My gym time was so important to me
Mm.
that I knew, and this was even like off season, like it was just really important to me to keep that up because once you're kind of already in the habit, no matter I think how long of a break you take from competing, as long as you maintain the habit of exercising and eating somewhat healthy, which we can get to into a little bit later, it's it really is just a mind switch. Like for me, I took a 4 year break because what a lot of people don't talk about in the bodybuilding world is your extreme dieting and someone
Exactly.
who has had body image issues for most of her life and just thinking like, oh well, this will improve my relationship with food. No, it will not. No, it will not. It will exacerbate any issue that you already have. The horror stories that you hear of people gaining 20 30 pounds after show because they just ate whatever they want is absolutely true. I was one of those people where within just God, I think 2 weeks I'd gained 20 pounds back.
Oh man.
Because I didn't know that after a show, you have to go through a rebound.
Yeah.
So I spent 4 years really trying to figure out, okay, if I'm going to do this again, can I do it right this time? So mindset is a very, very, very important component of
So
competing.
2019 was your first show?
That was my very first show. I was 30 years old.
Okay. What if you don't mind me asking, what was your body fat percentage at that time?
Body fat percentage, I don't remember, but I know my stage weight was, I think, 145.
Uh-huh.
And then this year, my lowest stage weight was 138.
Okay.
and
Yeah. So
she and
that's
she's tall, Jamie. How tall are you, Alora?
5'10.
5'10" at
Yeah.
138. So
So that's a lot for a 5'10 person to lose,
yeah.
versus some people might be 5'10 and like naturally skinny. I'm not. I have a very curvy body. So for me to lose, and it's funny because when I told people, oh yeah, I lost 30 pounds, for my show, they're like, where? Like, what do you mean where? Like, I can pinpoint where. Like, what do you mean? So that's why I think for me, wellness would be a better approach the next time I compete because it's like, well, I don't have to worry about necessarily losing as much weight. But to answer your question as far as body fat goes, I want to say I got down to about 8 or 9%,
Ooh.
be my guess this year, maybe 10. Because when I started, I was at 19%.
Mm-hmm.
And that even surprised me when I got my body fat measured in January of 2023. I was really surprised. I was like, 19? Dang, I thought it was higher than that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely, you lose a lot.
So back to the like the nutrition and the diet. Did you have somebody helping you with that, or was that like some research you're doing on your own once you got
Oh,
into the
man.
the world? I mean, I know
No, yeah,
definitely whenever you're working with somebody, it is good to go out and do your own research and kind of put
yeah.
like multiple heads together to come up with something. But did you
Mm-hmm.
specifically have somebody that you went to?
I did. So my first competition, so I actually switched coaches because I did not get along very well with my first coach. And at the time, I didn't have the confidence to walk away. I just thought, like, oh, this is what all bodybuilders go through. Like, he's telling me to suck it up and like I have to get my mind right kind of thing, like I do. But I just didn't feel like there was that emotional connection that honestly I think coaches need to have in this competition or
Yeah,
this
for
type of
sure.
competing. And so he did everything for me. I think the lowest calorie wise, like I put it in my fitness pal, I think the lowest day for me was anywhere, and this is by my fitness pal, it could be completely off, but it was about 1100 calories was my lowest day. And I was on that plan for about 6 months.
And that's
So
the full day.
imagine that was for my low carb days. My high carb days, my highest days was like 1500. My medium
Okay.
carb
Okay.
days were like 1300. Um, and now that I've done my own research, which is what I did in my 4 year break, I did my own research and I learned like, oh, for me to actually maintain like hormonal balance, I should not go below 1500 calories. Well, no
Mhm.
wonder I was the shit show. Like, no wonder I was binge eating every fucking night for like 2 weeks straight. Like, no wonder. My coach, though, for this past year had it on, he had it down pat. Like, he did not let me drop below 1500. And it was a very long prep. My prep was 7 months. Most preps are not that long. Most preps are about, I think 20 weeks is what they recommend, like for people who want to stretch it out. But some people do it in 8 weeks. That's some extreme dieting. I mean, you're basically cutting carbs from day one versus for me, I wanted to gradually get into it. So my coach this year was really good about making sure that I maintain some sort of hormonal balance while also still losing body fat. And he did a very good job of that. Not only did he give me my workout plan, he also structured my diet very well, including my rebound plan.
Did you feel when you were going below that 1500 mark, did you feel like you were drained? Like, did you have any
Uh-huh.
energy to fuel?
I felt very drained. Not just physically, like physically, it's almost like I was on automatic, but
Uh-huh.
emotionally and psychologically, I was done. Like every little thing triggered me. At the time, I was living at home with my dad as his caregiver. So not only was
Mm-hmm.
I doing physical therapy all day, I was still doing it when I got home. So I had no sense of balance of, trying to make sure that emotionally I'm staying elevated to be able to do what I need to do at home. And then I'm trying to think, was there anything? I mean, emotional eating was a big thing. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't realize that I was an emotional eater until my first show. And I was like, oh, like I would binge eat quite frequently during my first show, which is probably why I did not get any lower than 145, but 145 is still low for someone my height.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then fast forward to this year, I would say that I felt it a little bit more physically only because you get older, things start to hurt. Like my knees really felt it. Like when I was squatting, I was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, we're gonna have to drop that weight a little bit and just these knees can't handle it. And then for my 34th birthday, we went on a hike to Colorado, which I was still on my diet. Not very smart to do a hike in the Colorado Rockies at that altitude because
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, my now ex, he was beating me, and he was like, "You're in better shape than me." I was like, "Not right now. I'm not. Like, I need a break." And so I felt it more physically this year than I did emotionally. But I think it's because my coach kept my nutrition up.
Yeah.
Like the physical aspect, you can't get around that, but the emotional aspect, maintaining your hormones is so important as well.
And that's good. As a physical therapist, you have a little bit of an understanding on nutrition. You don't have a super in-depth
Right.
study of it. So it's good to seek out the help that you need.
Yep.
But as a physical therapist, you kind of touched on it a little bit. I feel like you're kind of at an advantage because you study the human body.
Mm.
What do you do to prevent injury? You talked about getting older, your knees are hurting.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you're doing in order to maintain and prevent that risk of injury?
That's a really good question. I started doing yoga during COVID. Actually, I haven't done it as much, but that's one thing I would love to get back into doing because I think that really helped me as far as seeing my weights go up in the weight room without forcing my body into positions that I couldn't get into. Like I worked on that flexibility. So I would say flexibility, a good warm up, definitely. I see people at the gym, we'll do a couple of sets with the bar and then add, 135, do a couple of sets and add another 90. And I'm like, you are your hips okay? Like, are you sure you're okay? But again, I don't know what they did prior to that. So it's like, for me, a good warm up flexibility is great. And then also resting. I will beat myself up very, very easily if I miss a day at the gym. But I have learned
Yeah.
that I'd much rather get a full night's rest and be able to move my body the way I need to for work than sit there to try to force myself up at like 4:30 in the morning, go to the gym and then go to work and just be so physically drained that it's like I can't do anything. So
Yeah,
resting
people
is the best.
underestimate the power of sleep for sure.
Hmm.
What other
Resting.
what else do you do for recovery, if anything?
Sometimes I'll go on walks. It depends.
Okay, like an
I
active rest
know,
day.
yeah, like active rest day. Like I know when I first got out of like my last show, it was summertime. So depending on the time of day, I try to get there in the morning. I would go to Memorial Park and I would just walk around. I'd still put my weighted vest on because for me, it's like I'm already conditioned. So I
Got
still
you.
want to challenge,
I gotta throw
but
that vest on.
you got to throw the vest on. But I'd go around the entire park. It'd take me about I think it was I did like a 4 or 5 mile walk. And for me, that's great. Like that's just great, nice and easy on the joints, nothing too crazy. And then other days, sometimes I just lay around on the couch. Just like, well, late today. So
So now that like you said, your prep was 7 months up until a show, and of course you have work and you have to kind of integrate all that. Now your schedule, like your workout schedule, is that something every day when you were actually prepping for a show?
So when I was prepping for a show, you start off with only doing cardio once a day. So getting everything in the morning was fine. I was my other job before I moved here from Houston was in San Antonio and my start time was 9. So I had absolutely no issue getting everything in before having to be at work at 9. When I started here, that was right around the time where my coach added more cardio. Like I had to go back at the end of the day. But when you onboard at work, you have to kind of go off that person's schedule. So the people I was onboarding went started like 8, and I was like, oh shit, that's really early. So for me, I was like, okay, I've got to be. This is where I learned sleep was important because I got a really bad sinus infection, and I was like, I have to be in bed before 9 o'clock because I noticed that as I was pushing my time trying to get to bed at like 9:30, my infection was not going away and I was so drained. So my morning routine was I'd get up between 4:15. I'd go to the gym between 5 and 7, shower and be at work for 8. And so that was my morning. And then after work, depending on how much cardio I had to do, which started at about an extra 30 minutes a day before it ramped up to an hour, I would go to the gym afterwards and do some sort of cardio. Typically it was walking. Again, talking about the joints, I got to the point at I think it was about 6 weeks out maybe, where I could not do the Stairmaster anymore. I could either bike or
No.
walk. Like I was like, no, we're just gonna walk on a nice little incline or I'm gonna bike. And so yeah, especially after, a long day of work and you're on your feet all day. I mean, it's rough. You got to keep a solid schedule for sure.
There's
So
so you mentioned your cardio. It's
Mhm.
and for those who don't know, there's different forms of fitness. You have your cardiovascular fitness and your strength and power. Um, for bodybuilding, what do you focus on mostly?
So you actually have to do a little bit of both. But as you get closer to the show, if anyone is going to tell you, it's going to say get your cardio in because you got to drop your fat.
Yeah.
Like you got to drop your fat. But for me, starting off, I was very adamant about making sure that I was getting my lifts in because you don't want to lose so much muscle mass. So making sure that I was getting in They're mainly hypertrophy, honestly, reps of
Mm-hmm.
12, 15, a little bit of endurance. I think I had some sets up to 25. I had a few strength where maybe I was doing 6 to 8 reps, like very little, but for the most part, it's hypertrophy. Um, so you focus pretty heavily on that, and depending on what like level you're going into, whether it be wellness or bikini, you're going to focus on body parts more often than not. So for example, I think for most women, legs is really important, but then you'll notice as you get higher up into like figure and physique where they have to have that X, you're going to be doing a little bit more back, a little bit more shoulders trying to get that. So
Mm-hmm.
depending on the class that you're going with is what your workout's going to pertain to. But everyone will tell you you've got to get your cardio in to drop your fat. I mean, the diet helps, but to really lean out because you need to be conditioned for the stage, they're going to tell you your cardio.
And when you're doing your cardio stuff, is it? So you said it's mostly walking, biking, stairmaster. I'm assuming there's not a whole lot of running involved in that,
So
but
when I would say no, towards the end for me, it wasn't. Like I could do a little bit of running in the beginning because I had the energy. In fact, I was probably doing little like high intensity circuits. Like I created my own circuits.
okay, I was gonna ask about that
Yeah, I
too.
created my own like hit circuits at the end of my session, probably for about a month and a half before I started to notice like, okay, I'm gonna have to pull back and keep my energy for my lift. So that's
Yeah,
another thing is trying to balance where you have your energy for. So no one really does hit training, I presume, in the bodybuilding world. It's usually pretty steady state.
yeah. I
So
was
if I
gonna ask
had
if
to
you
change
focused on
something,
steady state.
exactly. Most people are going to focus on steady state. So if I had to give up something, it was going to be the hit training. And my coach was fine with it. He was like, there's going to come a point where you can't do that anymore. He's like, but as long as you're feeling okay with it right now, you can keep doing that. And there was some running
Mm-hmm.
involved.
That's
Random.
interesting to hear. Oh, go ahead.
No, you got it. You got it. Stick with that one.
Well,
I was
no, I
changing the
was just
subject.
I was gonna say if so the whole thing with bodybuilding is cutting fat, building your muscle.
Mm,
With steady state, solid steady state exercise, it's that aerobic training.
mm.
You actually, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know that you burn more fat in an anaerobic training. So I think that hit would actually be more effective
Mm-hmm.
in bodybuilding than getting into that steady state.
You make a good point because that's something that was my mindset with hit. I was like, well, I'm going to burn a little bit more doing this. And I would still do
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit of steady state. So let's say, for example, I was supposed to get 35 minutes of cardio. I would do 20 minutes of hit and then I would end on the treadmill for 15 minutes walking. Because
Yeah.
I agree, and especially for someone with my body type who's a little bit higher fat, hit training I felt was a lot better. But the reason why I think steady state is kind of it's really driven into bodybuilding is because you want to protect your joints, because you're putting your body through so much stress
Mm-hmm.
that you want to do something that's going to
Low
kind of,
impact.
yeah, low impact and take the, like, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to think about it. The decision making is out of
Oh,
the picture
okay.
because
Yeah.
when you lose your carbs, that brain fog is 100% real. That is so real. So to take that kind of like, oh, I don't have to think about it, I can just sit and walk mindlessly, that's really important as well.
So me using context, this steady state, that's just maintaining. So versus hit, steady state is just like
Steady
walking,
state is just
like you
going to be
said,
straight. Like I'm walking
just
at a
straight across.
distance, just straight across. It can be at
Yeah,
an
Okay,
so
okay.
incline
like when
for
you
a
go
certain.
for a run, Rob, like when you go for a run, you're really tired in the beginning, right? You start to run, you're using your anaerobic system initially. You're running, you're tired, and once you switch over to that aerobic system, you start to reach a point to where you're just cruising, man. It's just that steady state. Your
That runner's high.
breathing
I
is
got
as
you.
That
normal,
runner's high, yeah.
and that's
Okay,
kind
okay.
of what that is you kind of get to a point in your aerobic training where you're just cruising basically.
And then with hit, it's just that up and down. So one of my
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
favorite ways to do circuit training and I learned this through CrossFit really, is doing like, I'll do anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes of a certain like complex, whether that be 3 exercises, 4 exercises, usually about 2 to 3. And I would cycle that through for 8 minutes, then I would rest. My rest time was honestly really dependent on how I felt. I tried to do, like, if I did 5 minutes of work, I tried to do 1 to 1, so 5 minutes of rest. But sometimes I could knock that down to 3 depending on how I felt. And then I would repeat it again, but maybe I upped the weight a little bit on one of them. And then I'd repeat it again, and maybe I upped the reps this time. So you're keeping that intensity, but you're also allowing yourself to rest. And I think for people who are just starting off with HIIT, it's really important, I think, to keep that either 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 rest ratio, especially if you've never been, like, if you've never done HIIT training, because people think like, oh, I only need to rest 1 minute. I'm like, these are for people who have that condition. If you don't have that condition, you're more prone to injure yourself. The goal of HIIT training is to keep that intensity throughout however long you're doing. If you're doing 20 minutes of HIIT, when you're resting, that rest time is supposed to be enough for you to go back and hit it hard again. The same intensity if you can do it.
I think most people, when they're doing HIIT training, they don't really hit that high intensity. Most people will stay in that moderate intensity level, just because it's really hard to stay that high intense for that long period of time.
And you're gonna see drops. Like, I mean, I might get 4 or 5 rounds in my first set, but then by the time I get to the end, I maybe got 3. Like,
start moving
it's
slow.
just the nature of the human body that unless you're trained to do that, it's inevitable for you to kind of drop to those like just a few rounds versus keep the same intensity.
It definitely helps with recovery.
It does.
Like your body's ability to recover after a bout of high intensity movement. It helps them increase or decrease the amount of time it takes for your body to recover.
Yep, definitely.
So in your say like in your off seasons, so you got this regimen that you stick to when you're in season. Very, all right, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. So in your off season, of course, you still want to be healthy. You still want to work out. You still want to eat right. Do you have a particular plan for off season? I don't want to say off season prep, but just in off season.
It's off season. So whenever you're not in season, you're off season. So my off season is probably 2 weeks. Like, I told myself I will not go back to compete next year. It is a lot of money. I will let you know that. I easily spent $5,000. Spent $5,000 on coaching alone. On coaching alone, and it depends on how much you pay for your coach. My coach was $300 a month. So imagine doing that for 7 months. That's $2,100 right there. Your suit is like on the low end. My suit was nice, but it was the low end, and that was $400. And then I paid for opposing coach. So it's like, yeah, I spent a lot of money, y'all. Like, I spent a lot. So
I would have never even thought about the cost.
And you don't get paid. Like, you get paid when you're up in like the IFBB Pro and things like that. You get paid when you go to the Olympia. But even then, you're not getting paid that much. People who do this for a living are really getting their money from their sponsorships. Like, that's where the money is coming from.
Yeah.
But for my off season, when I first got out of not my first show, my second show, because my shows were only about 2 weeks apart. So I had like a little bit of a time, and my coach really convinced me. He's like, I think you should do the Austin show. So I was like, all right, bet, I'll do the Austin show. So I went right back into prep. But after Austin, he had my rebound plan ready. So I was on a rebound plan through August. And the only reason why I ended, this was July to August, the only reason why I ended is because it was just expensive. But if I could do it all over again, I probably would have just said, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to be on a rebound plan for at least, 3 months, because I think I needed that extra help to kind of rebound me back. Because once I really wasn't on the plan anymore, I was just kind of eating what I wanted. And I definitely felt it in my clothes. I was like, oh, this is me gaining all of my weight back. Shit. But when you're in the off season, yes, you still eat healthy. Like, for the most part, I still cook all of my own food. It is very, very rarely that I will go out to eat unless, I'm going out with some coworkers after work or something like that, Or this past week, I took myself out for a Valentine's Day date and I had an awesome salad with some lamb. Like, I still go out and it was so good, and a nice glass of wine. Like, it was so delicious. So I think I definitely still eat, I would say, healthy. I don't eat fried food. I mean, I crave it from time to time, but you will not see me going buying like Chick-fil-A or Whataburger. I mean, I will, but it's not my first thing. It's not my first thing that I go to. It really has to be one of those things where it's like, well, you know what? There ain't nothing else around, so let me go get
I
myself.
couldn't do it, man.
You
Yeah.
said like the top two right there, Chick-fil-A,
I know,
Whataburger.
there's still,
Ugh.
especially here in Texas.
I don't have the strength. I don't got it.
It is 100. I kid you not. It is just mental and discipline where you're like, nah, you know, if you touch that, it's game over, right? Like, that's gonna be your life for a while.
Man, that's definitely where I struggle the most is with food. I cannot not eat. And when I eat so much too, my portion
Yeah.
sizes are ridiculous. I eat enough for a full family and then
I
some.
can easily, especially like on food that is kind of like very water heavy, like sushi. You know, it's a lot, especially fresh fish. I can easily like knock out 6-7 plates if someone let me. Like those big old rolls.
I
of
feel
some-
like I have competitions with myself when I go out to eat. Like,
Uh-huh.
can I out eat myself? Can I do it today? Is it?
the most
I went to
in
CC's
a long
Pizza one
time.
time, and I knew that the last time I ate 15 slices of pizza at CC's, I'm gonna do.
Oh God,
That's too much. That's too much, Jamie.
that's way too much. That's where I'd be like, nah, I'm gonna be on the toilet. I'm gonna have the bubble gut. Like, I will see y'all at work in a couple of days. I need
a couple of days.
Like, that's gonna be me, that kind of pizza. Like 100%.
So I heard you mentioning. Did you say that there's a break? Do you have any future bodybuilding endeavors?
I do. So this year will be 35, which is a milestone in and of itself. But it's funny because now when I go back to compete, I'll have to compete in the Masters 35 and over. And I'm like, I was like, Masters is now 35? Are you kidding me? So I do want to compete again. At first I wasn't sure if I did, but I'm like, you know what? No, I actually really did enjoy it. I enjoyed getting dolled up. That's not something I do for myself every day. And I enjoyed just seeing all of my hard work be presented in front of people. But really, I just loved looking at where I was my last show and then where I'm at with whatever current show I'm doing. So to look at my 2019 photos, which I think are on my, in fact, yeah, it is on my Instagram. And then looking at my 2023, I'm like, yeah, that's a whole different person on that stage. Whole different person. And so I do think I will probably, if I compete, it will be either the end of 2025 or into 2026. So that'll be either 36, 37 years old. So that's where I'm looking at doing that again.
Gotcha. So somebody that is now competing in the Masters, do you have any I'm joking. But is there any advice you would give to somebody that's trying to get into bodybuilding? Is there anything that that kind of jumped out at you that you weren't expecting? Any like misconceptions, anything like that?
So my misconception was I could go out and have a social life and eat whatever I want and still be okay. That is not. I mean, my coworkers at my old job in San Antonio, they would make fun of, they're like, did you bring your food? And I'm like, yeah. And I just look at them like, you know, I'm in prep. Like, yes, I'm still coming out to have fun, but I'm bringing my food. Like, this is coming with me. So that is the one thing. It is. You have to have the discipline. If you don't feel like you have the discipline, then it's probably not time for you to do it. I would go to a show. That was one thing someone recommended me. They're like, oh, go check out a show. I never checked out a show until I competed. Never looked at a show until I competed.
Oh, wow.
And so when you do get to that day and you look at some of these women, you're like, holy shit, they're lean as hell. Like, I mean, I thought I looked good, but holy hell. So the discipline and the expectation that you can maintain a social life, you can. It is doable, but it is not the social life that you had before competing. It's not. I would go out, but I wouldn't drink. I would have my own food, or I would eat before I would go, and I would brush my teeth so I would not try to have anything else or chew some gum. And then it's also hard if you have kids. So at the time, I was living with my ex who has 2 kids, and so here he is cooking them some damn good food, and I'm just looking at him like, I can't have it. That smells and looks good. So that's a big part of it. Selecting a coach is also very important.
It
Like,
sounds like it.
yeah, selecting a healthcare provider. It is very important that if you and your PT don't vibe, it's okay to go look for someone else. And a therapist that recognizes that they're not vibing, they should have, in my opinion, enough confidence and enough efficacy in themselves to say, you know what, I'm not the one for you. You can't fix everyone, and everyone's not going to get along with you, and that's okay. And that's for coaching, it's the same. My first coach definitely got results, but he was not the one for me. He was not the one for me. I had another coach that same season in 2019. She had her own personal stuff going on, and she was really just, I think, trialing out. So at this point, I was desperate. I didn't know who else to reach for, and she was helping my friend who was also competing in the same show. So I definitely commend her as well, though, because she did not let me drop below 1,500 as well. So that was great. My coach that I had this last year was the most expensive coach that I had. I actually started off with someone else who just gave me a cookie cutter diet, and I could tell it was cookie cutter because I'm like, I'm not seeing any results. I've been on this diet for 2 months. He was like, well, you're telling me you're not always sticking to it. I was like, well, I'm not always going to tell you that I'm a 10 out of 10 on a diet, because there's always room for improvement, always, no matter what. And so I ended up switching to my other coach, who's recommended to me by my posing coach. So I felt like I had a really good team. My posing coach was awesome, and then this coach was awesome as well. But $300 a month, it's like, that's steep, y'all. Like, that's
but you
really
get what you pay for, right?
Get what you paid for, and I 100% got what I paid for. So if I did it all over again, I would go back to him without any issue. I would go back to my posing coach, who I believe too is also an IFBB pro. So it's nice to have these, and they're younger, actually. I think they're both in their like early 30s. So it's really nice to have these coaches who were willing to like kind of sit down and like, hey, it's okay, I get it, this happens, here's what we're going to do. And sometimes my coach would have to have a come to Jesus talk with me, but he also gave me that side of like, hey, if something's not right, I need you to let me know so I can help you.
That's good. That's good. Nice. So any social media stuff where people can find you? Any plugs you got throwing out?
Oh man, I have not been on social media a lot, but in fact, I would have to look at my Instagram handle to tell you where to look me up. But I am on Instagram. I want to say my Instagram handle is Lolo_Fashosho. So
Okay.
so Lolo is that was my dad's nickname for me.
Uh-huh.
So it's LOLO_FASHOSH or whatever. I don't know. I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So that is where I probably do most of my posting if I do it. I am trying to get more into social media, to be honest, because when I first got into like actual exercise, I got into it because I'd gained so much weight from college that I was about to go back. And this is when I just moved from Japan. So I'm a military brat, just moved from Japan, and we were going back for some friends' graduation. And I was like, I can't go back looking like this. So that was the first time I got into exercising. And so I have learned a lot in the last, I'm 34 now, so 15 years. I've learned a lot in the last 15 years that I would want to show that to the world, because I want there to be, if there's a girl that was like me who had nowhere to look, didn't know who to turn to, didn't see someone like herself on social media or anywhere else, I hope that I can provide that for someone. So my goal is to get more involved on that aspect of not just showing my workouts, but actually walking through the exercises. It's really easy to post your ass on social media, real easy. But it is hard to be on social media and provide an educational aspect to it and keep someone's attention. And that would be my goal.
Inspirational.
And be inspirational. I'm someone clearly who does not have a filter. RJ knows I can talk. I like to talk. I have my moments. But I also, again, want to make sure, like, if you're going to get into this, get into it for the right reasons that pertain to what your goals are, not because someone else told you you had to get into it. Because
Right,
if you
right.
just keep looking for external support, that's going to run out real quick. And the only thing you're going to have left is, all right, internally, what's driving me?
100%. And you kind
Yeah.
of said it multiple times throughout this podcast that your biggest motivator was the pictures of you previously, like seeing yourself before and where you are now. And that's
Yeah.
one of the biggest motivators for people in competitions and like solo sports.
Yeah.
Your biggest competitor is yourself.
Is. And that's what I think people don't realize, which is why when I didn't place, I walked away from the show being like, shit, I looked better than I did in 2019. I don't care. But it's you against you. Yes, you're being compared to a group of people, but it's really you against you. And the coaches are looking at, especially if they know you and they've seen you a lot. Like, I'm not someone that's been seen a lot. So it's not like they remember me from 4 years ago. But if I was
Yeah.
competing year in, year out, I'm sure they're like, oh shit, she's progressed a lot. That probably
Yeah.
could have changed the outcome. But I wasn't doing it for that. I was doing it because I want to see, can I be better than I was in 2019? And I definitely did that. So my next goal is, can I be better than I was in 2023? The next time I do this.
Hell yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, Laura, thank you again for letting us bug you on your lazy
Yeah, it's been
Sunday.
good.
Absolutely.
Come
I told
talking
you,
to us.
this was the highlight of my day, y'all. Thank you
Yeah,
for
Oh,
having
nice.
me.
that's sweet.
Yeah. So we're definitely gonna have to have you on again, and
Yeah.
probably talk about a little more PT stuff or anything you can come up with.
Oh,
But
yeah.
again,
No.
definitely enjoyed having you. And that's it for another episode of the Unleashed Performance Therapy Podcast. If there's any topics that anybody wants to talk about or any special guests you want us to get on here, go ahead and shoot us a DM on Instagram, or you can check us out at unleash.tx. Like Jamie always says, scroll down, be sweet to us, leave a 5-star review, tell us how we did. Like, follow, subscribe, and all that jazz. And until next time.
All right, thanks, Laura.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you.